side of life. The Todd Starnes Commentary.
Fast food workers in a number of cities walked off the job yesterday, protesting low wages under the Golden Arches and Wendy's. They call them McJobs. The employees want $15 an hour, more than double what many of them are currently making. Now, that's all well and good, but I think it's time these workers got a reality check. The reason they have low wages is because they work in fast food. They're serving quarter pounders with cheese, not lobster and caviar. So let's look at this logically. Let's say the cashier at Burger King makes $15 an hour. That means the owner's cost per employee doubles. How do you think they're going to make up that expense? Either raise food prices or cut jobs. And I doubt McDonald's is going to supersize their value meal. And in this economy, we should all be thankful to have McJobs. I'm Todd Starnes.
Welcome back. Thank you, Todd Starnes. I think Donald Trump should have a recording for the people that went on strike. It should say, "What? You're fired." Yeah, it seems to me we live in an age now where we look at the employers and they've become the enemy, when in fact the enemy, in the sense of the employment situation that is currently exists, is the government and what they are putting on employers, and that would be Obamacare and a whole host of regulations, though not as many, or maybe a little more now than President Bush, much more costly. So there's there's gamesmanship playing in that debate about the regulations. Oh, it's not as many as President Bush, but if you look at the cost of them, you see it's much greater. And you wonder why we're in this current state of what has been described as the new normal. Now, we're working on some things here to bring you Dan the Man Celia, and we will, when I say that, look what happens. That's why he's Dan the Man. Dan the Man Celia, Financial Issues host, the man who can make Ben Bernanke entertaining, and a man who can explain quantitative easing. That is a really tall order, and you fill it. How are you, my friend?
Good, Frank.
Well, thank you for making time for us tonight.
Having some technical issues here. How are you?
Yes, yeah, I know, and that's on our end, and we're doing everything we can, but we know that you are doing everything you can, and we just appreciate the extra effort. I'm doing well, but I had a question for you.
Okay.
We're sitting at oil. You talked about oil today, and oil you mentioned at the time was $108 a barrel. And you were sitting there almost like relieved and almost happy, but you weren't happy because how could you be happy at that inflated price? And it really is emblematic of what has happened in our economy and what many have described as the new normal, slow growth. We're not going to see 4% growth, maybe 2% growth, maybe a little more, maybe a little less. So are we in a new normal? And if so, what is the cause of this new normal?
Yeah, well, great question. I'll tell you, everything is a new normal. Every indice, every growth rate number, it's all a new normal, because what has happened is the administration, the Fed, the Department of Commerce, they have lowered the bar so low that, they're not going to call it a new normal. They're going to call it normal growth. But the fact of the matter is, it's normal growth being measured against a very shorter yardstick, so to speak, or a lower bar. And so, yes, the new normal, I suppose, is going to be a 2% growth. And if we get 2.5%, they're going to be dancing in the streets. And, 2.5% GDP growth is not growth at all, in my opinion. And I've said this for years. The fact of the matter is 2.5% GDP growth allows us to maintain the lousy economy that we have. 2.5% is stagnant, sitting still, doing nothing. Not going backwards, not going forward, because you have to factor in population growth, which nobody wants to do. So technically, 2.5% allows you to keep pace with population growth. So you really need 2.6% to be moving forward in the economy. We haven't had that forever, and I don't see it on the horizon anytime soon. So, they're happy about the new GDP number that came out. But here's what happens, Crane. What happens is, back in April, as I was ranting about this, the United States government, Department of Commerce, BLS, all decided that we're going to recalculate the way we calculate GDP growth. And it was starting January or July 1st. So back in April, I said, July or August, we're going to have 2.5% GDP growth. And that's what we got for the last reading for the second quarter, because they changed the way they calculated it. So if you can't get what you really want or need, then you change the way you calculate it.
And this is why we go to Dan. Well, so many people go to Dan. Financial Issues is the show daily here, and 8 to 10 Central. Please say I got the time right, brother.
You got it. Because
right.
I got your time. Crane, folks, by the way, Crane was on my program this morning giving some great commentary on Syria, because I'm a financial guy. I don't cover that stuff. I knew Crane was going to be all over, and he was. And I think I messed up the time on
No, that wasn't a problem. No, I was like, sometimes I mess up the time because you're jumping between Eastern and everything else. And also, this is another part of something, and just an offshoot of a general question. Dan,
Sure.
You're a very hard worker. You have a high bar. And I'm not patronizing you, but the bottom line is there are people that say, okay, there's the goal. I have to get there, and it's my responsibility to do that. And then there are those who would say, you know what, I'm going to do just enough to get by. And then there are those who say, I'm not going to do much at all. And I'm just going to do, what pleases me and blame everybody else. You see these minimum wage strikes. And what goes through your head as you're viewing this, not only economically, but culturally?
Well, I culturally, I can't say all the things that go through my head on radio, but I would say that, I'm a free market guy. Mm-hmm. And it's a lunacy. Listen, the minimum wage is supposed to be a stepping stone. The minimum wage is to bring people into the workforce and allow them the opportunity to understand what it's like to work, earn some wages, and hopefully develop the desire to continue to do that and to move on to the next level. A minimum wage is an entry point. Now, there are some folks that, for one reason or another, whether it be desire or whatever, don't get past or through that minimum wage. And I understand that. And I understand that, that's difficult. And I give those folks a lot of credit for continuing to work. Amen. But the fact of the matter is, you can't change an entire system in so many organizations, whether they be small retailers, large retailers, fast food, whatever it is, that are working on very low margins. And to double a minimum wage is going to do one of two things. It's either going to force them into a much more automation. So there's going to be very few people working. You're going to walk up, and it's going to be similar to an ATM machine. You're going to place your order, and they're going to eliminate people out of the workforce, as many as they possibly can. Or it's going to force them out of business, some of the small people. So it's just, the problem with it is just not logical. It is the mentality that I'm going to say that I believe this administration has just encouraged for so many years now, that, corporate America, those that have, owe something to everybody else. And those that have need to be lowered so that everybody can be on the same playing field. And that's not how a free market economy works. And I understand we have people in Washington and the ideology that has permeated Washington, that has permeated the country, is one of everybody needs to be equal and there needs to be a sense of fairness. That's called socialism. And then eventually it'll end up that everybody needs to be contributing and working for the state. And the state's going to be the priority. That's called Marxism. But we're on the way to one of them. Pick one if we continue to go down this road. So when I see those things, I get very, very frustrated. I don't expect everybody to understand the economics of free markets and, what minimum wage is all about and all those kinds of things. But, these union folks that are trying to unionize, well, they're going to have a very small crowd of people to unionize if it ever works because, like I said, they're going to automate or they're going to go out of business. They're going to change the way they do business. Something is going to change. So anyway, yeah.
And I love the explanation because you bridged it to say, okay, they're going to take the profit out of it in business and then it's going to move to the state, which is Marxism. Wow. That's what we are seeing. We're seeing that in healthcare, certainly, going to the state with a single payer system that is going to be introduced because they take the profit out of those things. But you could write a book on what I could put on maybe a napkin. And that's why we're having you on to ask you these questions. Here's another question, Dan. When you look at, you called commodity prices years back. You said these things are going to be jumping around. You're going to see big inflation. Then you called QE forever. What are you seeing in the near future? Oh, and your most recent on the growth, seeing 2.4% growth because they tinkered with the formula of the numbers. What are you seeing on the horizon? Are we going to see another jump in commodity prices, or what are we going? What are you seeing?
Well, yeah, we have to, Crane. I mean, it's one of the things that's very interesting to me is that I came to the conclusion about 4 months ago that we're just never going to see oil below $90 a barrel again. And the reason that I believe that it stayed up so high is because the dollar is devaluing. And, that's one of the biggest and the first commodities that's being affected. So, it takes more of them to buy a barrel of oil. So, I think we're going to continue to see commodity prices go up, particularly food, particularly wheat, corn.
Yes.
Certainly, we're looking at global shortages of food that's going to impact commodity prices, and we're looking at inflation. So,
and that is why
it has to happen. Go ahead.
Yeah. Dan, we're out of time, but thank you for taking the time, brother. Have a wonderful weekend.
From the AFR National Weather Center, locally severe thunderstorms